This video continues from the previous video. Okay, so composition, right? So we've covered that format is how we arrange things on a page. And if you work with grids, predefined grids, it's really going to help you in layout. Composition now is we're now going to select the elements using the principles of design that are going to be on the page. So all the techniques that we just covered for formatting can also be applied to composition. The difference is that composition, the focus is on the elements specifically rather than the big picture, rather than how they're arranged. Okay, so one of the things you want to do with how you lay out your elements is directing the eye. Where does your eye go when you look at this document on the right? It goes to that big orange circle, right? Why? Well, one, it's orange. Two, it's big, right? And so that's what happens. But then where do you go from there? Well, that's what composition is about. We now have actual lines, but we also have leading lines. And so our eye starts to move around the page. And that is how we decide to select which principles and elements we want by how we want to direct the eye. I thought this was really great. I have never heard of this movie, but it was absolutely great poster of how they used the term or the name of the movie and then literally unspooled it, but also made these really great lines that came out of it. So you want the eye to go to the main point. And here, the large text, multicolored large text, is where your eye goes first. And then the lines start to lead it around the composition. And it's really, really, they did a really good job of making the lines pull you around. And then as your eye's moving around, you have different text, you have different little points to land on. And so that's how they end up designing this, right? So, and then if you look, you see, if you divide this into thirds, you see that unspooling is on that top line. If you divided this page into thirds, it's on that top line. And then once the lines are, they just basically looks like they kind of treated this a little bit like a perspective drawing. Just take the lines off the page that all came back to instead of a horizon, a vanishing point on the horizon. Can't speak this morning. The points of the letters become those vanishing points, and then the lines go out from there. And then they just reoriented text along those lines. And once you have the game plan, once you know how you want to lay out your design, it makes it a lot easier to do it. You don't spend a lot of time just trial and error. I mean, you do some trial and error, but you do less. Okay, so of course, not every design is going to have, very obvious lines, but look at these. Let's take a look at these two floor plans. So as I keep talking about wayfinding, how does someone travel through your building? How do they know where to go? So if you look at these floor plans, they use leading lines to direct the eye, to bring people through, and create interesting compositions that make it much easier for those who use the building to navigate their habitats. So let's look at the first one. You walk into this beautiful foyer, and it's got these grand staircases. So obviously, immediately those go upstairs. Then there's this, if you're in there looking at this space, then you can see, you're standing here, then you can also see there's something of interest this way, so you walk this way. Or from here, you can also turn to your right and to your left and see there are also other ways to go. I love this beautiful floor plan. It'd be interesting to see what the house itself looks like. It has sort of this, like I think those French chateaus, it has a very French chateau influence in the way that they laid out their floor plans, but this is clearly very modern. Okay, and so there are all these different points of view that lead the eye and then direct the person where they're going to go, which direction are they going to head in. Now, I guess you would have to know in this case that these were the bedrooms. But if you live there, I guess you would know that. And that this is the whole master suite and the guest suite. But for most people, they're going to come this way because look at those beautiful windows. It's probably got a great view, and it's going to pull the person into that space, which is the main space that you want them to go into. Okay? And so we also apply this in our planning. We also want to direct the eye. We also want to compose our spaces in a way that help use leading lines to draw people in. One other thing you can do is adjust your contrast. Right? When you look at this building, that there's a very strong contrast between the dark, the old, and the bright and the new. And it's very clear how you get in that building. Obviously, color. Here's an application of color. That will help bring in and arrange the composition so that people will know where to go. Same thing with floor coverings, floor materials, floor designs are really a great way to use color to help guide people through your buildings. Okay, and then style. And style is the distinctive appearance. And we're going to go through now some of the more popular modern styles of art and design. Until you develop your own style as a seasoned designer, it's recommended that you start off using these at first, and then you start combining them, and then you start to break away into your own thing. And that's the reason you want to initially use other styles is because it's kind of like when you're a kid and you're learning how to do the alphabet and you trace letters. So it gives your hand that coordination. You're kind of doing the same thing here. You're practicing how to apply style by using something that already has preset and determined boundaries and rules. And remember, we did the principles and elements chart, and you fill that out, and then you use those. You apply that. And then you want to get more in. Once you feel like you've mastered that, then you start combining styles. You'll take some things from this style and some things from this style and bring them together. And it either creates a serious mess or it creates something really amazing. But either way, it's still good, ends up being good design, even if people don't like it. And as we talked about, taste is subjective. You can't get people to like things or not like things. They like what they like. So style. Let's get into arts and crafts movement was actually started in England, and then it moved here into the United States, and it just really blossomed. Most arts and crafts buildings in the United States are houses, though there are some chapels, churches, and other buildings that were built in the style. Mostly houses, though. The goal was to look to the craftspeople, because what had happened when the Industrial Revolution moved in was that things became manufactured, and manufactured things are nearly identical. And so one of the things that happens when you create something by hand is it's not. It's almost impossible for a person to build the same thing twice. It has some tiny little maybe even imperceivable differences, but nonetheless, they're not identical cookie cutters. And so the arts and crafts movement was artists railing against mechanization. And so the roots for arts and crafts were in not just architecture, but also many forms of art. It was sort of it was a rebellion. And the Red House was considered the first of its kind. And the cool thing is this: the first who does something gets to define it. And so he got to define what arts and crafts movement was going to look like. And you can see there's the floor plan as well of the home. It is very much laid out on a grid. You can see, right? And It's got some really beautiful, a lot of wood, a lot of very natural materials. Frank Lloyd Wright did he started off in the arts and crafts movement before he broke away and did prairie style architecture. But you can still see, you can look at a Frank Lloyd, once you studied him enough, you can look at a Frank Lloyd Wright house and know it's his. Also, you can see he likes to use these really thick walls, and obviously, it helps make the structure stronger, but it was also because he used a lot of masonry on the inside as well as on the outside. And masonry is brick, stone, concrete block, load-bearing tile block. Usually tile's the face block on a concrete block. They had their own furniture. And it is still among us today. You can go to I believe Restoration Hardware furniture store still is very heavily arts and crafts, but a lot of arts and crafts homes. We'll look much more depth of these once we get into architectural history. But for now, I just want to give you kind of an overview of what style is and what potential styles you can select from. Biomorphic design. This is really, really cool. There's a famous architect who was a biologist who then got her degree in architecture. And so she sort of is one of the leading biomorphic designers out there. And the whole idea is that it's based on nature. And it's kind of not that different in a way from what happened with the arts and crafts movement. It's sort of this need people feel to connect to nature because we've removed ourselves from it. And so biomorphic design is about returning to nature. It started in the Art Nouveau movement, and that we will talk about Art Nouveau. So there's no straight line. There are no straight lines in nature, just free forms, unless it's on accident. Because that does happen on accident. Like if you've ever seen trees growing off a nurse log, those might be a straight line. But that's only because the log fell over and the seeds just happened to have... But they rarely do. Usually they're a little bit off. But sometimes it happens. So there are no straight lines. So what ends up happening is this is a very biomimicry, symbiotic... I don't know. Let's take a look at some of it. There you go. Start off as a commercial style, but it has now made its way down into residential. In Selfridge's department store is probably one of the original. It was in 2003. I was still in practice back then, and I remember when this came out. And it does some really cool things. They lit the panels so that it has this undulation of light at night. It's really, really cool. And here's a section. This is actually part of a wall section showing you how the panels, this dot is one of these dots. And if you cut it this way and pulled that off and looked at it from the side, this shows how these were attached to the system. Oh, wait a minute, maybe I'm wrong. I think maybe these are the dots. Sorry. It's hard to tell here. Yeah, no, I was wrong. That's the dot. It's bolted in. But yeah, it just shows how they attach this to the structure, because the building underneath, if you look at the building underneath, it's actually kind of... It's just the facade, the coating on it. Okay, and so this is Aqua Tower. And it is, I believe it's mixed use, but it's this beautiful undulation. Of the forms on the building. Looks like it's organic. And there's a house. This is just a model. It hasn't been built, but it was based on, it was inspired by, as you can see, a shark. It's got that very fish-like design. And then one more example of biomorphic design and some details. Okay, we're going to stop here and finish and then continue in the next video.